say good morning. We're on a road trip.
Good morning.
Yeah.
We're on our way. I haven't really been sleeping that well, but we're going to make it anyway.
Oh, it's early for us.
I'm already tired, but it's time to wake up.
So, we're on a road trip. We're working on a big project. And so, that's why we're not going to have the news show probably for the next couple weeks, because we're actually out of the office on a big project. But anyway, to that end, this will give you a little hint on what we're looking into, I guess. I've been reading this book here, Cross Currents, The Perils of Electromagnetic Pollution, by Dr. Robert Becker. He's actually got another one called The Body Electric, very good. But it's interesting because he's talking about the effects of microwaves in here and how microwave radiation really wasn't a thing in our environment this prevalent until after World War II, when they figured out they could use it for radar and communications and stuff like that. But all of the studies that they did were short term, so they didn't see what the effects were of the non-ionizing radiation. And then all of the studies, pretty much from the 50s on, were funded in large part by the military. And so the results that came out ended up jiving with the military stance on how non-ionizing radiation's fine, basically. And if you came out and said that it wasn't, you were ostracized and your funding was pulled. But even with that, there were studies coming out in the 70s from other countries that clearly showed that there was direct damage to nerve elements of the retina, for example. And this just went on throughout the years, that it showed different types of damage. And the safety standard and all that, the stuff that they did, it was all basically government pushed, if you know what I mean. And then in the 1980s, the Air Force did this $5 million experiment. It was supposed to be the big experiment, the be-all, end-all experiment. It was funded by the Air Force to show that this microwaves, even at very large levels of like 2.45 gigahertz, are fine and not going to cause any problem. And what's interesting about it is they spent $5 million and they did it with this notobiotic rats, which is a term meaning germ and virus free. Now, unless you were born in a cesarean section and then kept in sterile conditions your whole life and lived in one of those plastic bubbles like Bubble Boy, you're not going to be notobiotic. So the conditions of the study right from the onset were rigged, basically, with this $5 million. In fact, that's why it cost so much, because they had to buy these fancy rats to do it, which is kind of ridiculous. And it seems to me that they set it all up with those rats in the hopes that it would show everything was fine. But guess what? It didn't show that. What it actually showed was 18 of the rats that were exposed to the microwaves ended up with cancer, versus only 5 in the control group. And then they tried to pull that crap about how we star rats always get cancer anyway, which just begs the question of why would you do a study with rats that you know are going to get cancer anyway? That's kind of makes the whole study pointless. They say that with GMOs and other stuff too. Oh, well, those rats always get cancer. Well, then why'd you do the study? Kind of makes you a moron. Like, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, so they had these fancy rats, Bubble Boy rats, and 18 of them got cancer anyway. And guess where the cancer was? The cancer was primarily in the adrenal glands, the thyroid, and the pituitary gland. Nowhere else. That should tell you something. In fact, I say that tells you a lot more than anything, that even though they had the fancy Bubble Boy rats, the rats still got freaking cancer. A lot of them. Okay? But they tried to push this off in Scientific American that this is just great. And it shows that non-ionizing radiation has no health effects. And it's pretty freaking ridiculous. So, I mean, the military-industrial complex is there to ensure that the military-industrial complex will continue going. And whatever they have to do to keep that happening, they will fund that and make that happen. It's kind of like cancer charities. They have no reason to try and cure cancer, and cure themselves out of existence. Well, it's kind of the same thing with the military. But we are now being exposed to 1 million times the microwave radiation in our environment over 30 years ago. And all of the science going back 60 years that says that this is okay for you is tied to the military-industrial complex and the government, who needs it to be okay for you. Okay?